Namaskar, hello and welcome viewers. You're watching this special presentation of Sansad TV, Bills and Acts, where we analyze bills that impact you, acts that empower you, and programs that matter to you. I'm your host, Kriti Mishra, and today the spotlight is on the Income Tax Act 2025. The passage of the new Income Tax Act 2025 is a landmark development towards building a streamlined, simplified tax framework aimed at enhancing transparency, equity, and economic efficiency. Enacted by Parliament after intensive deliberations, the legislation reflects the Government of India's commitment to modernizing the tax architecture in alignment with global best practices and domestic aspirations. To modernize and simplify India's outdated tax laws, the government announced a comprehensive review of the Income Tax Act 1961. This led to the introduction of the Income Tax Bill 2025, which was referred to a select committee of Parliament for detailed examination. After receiving extensive recommendations and suggestions from stakeholders, the government decided to withdraw the original bill and introduced a revised version. This updated bill incorporated most of the committee's inputs along with improvements in legal clarity and drafting. It was passed by both houses of Parliament in the monsoon session and now forms the foundation of India's new income tax framework. And joining us for deeper insights, in the studio we have with us a very special guest, Mr. Panda. He was chairman of Select Committee on Income Tax Bill. Sir, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Namaskar.
We also have young voices and aspirations in the studio. A very warm welcome all of you, and thank you so much for joining us. So let's begin talking about this act. Now, this act was a very complicated one. 65 times it was amended, more than 4,000 amendments. Finally, we have the Income Tax Act 2025. Tell us about its relevance for Indian economy.
First of all, thank you for having me here. It's wonderful to have this young audience. You know, I'm very glad that you have students that are engaging with important issues like this, because financial literacy is a very important aspect of growing into adulthood, understanding not just their own careers and own incomes, but the impact on the economy as a whole. Now, also, before talking about the act itself, I want to put it in context. The Modi government in the past 11 years has transformed the landscape of the economy, which is why we have become the fastest growing economy for so many years now. We have become the fourth largest economy. One of the aspects of it has been to overhaul and to get rid of a lot of obsolete, antiquated laws. Some of these laws were from the 19th century, from the British Raj times, completely irrelevant to the modern era. And more than 1,500 such laws were either completely removed or completely overhauled. And so the Income Tax Act, now the Income Tax Act is arguably the act that impacts the largest number of Indians, in the sense that we have more than 9 crore taxpayers, approaching 100 million. And as India is growing in affluence, more and more taxpayers are coming into the net every year. More and more people are getting pulled out of lower levels of income into higher levels of income. You know, the World Bank has attested that 250 million Indians have been pulled out of poverty within the last decade. So in this context, an act which was 6 decades old, 6 decades is not the big issue. The big issue, like you said, was it had 4,000 amendments. It had a lot of language from the 19th century, a lot of Latin phrases. And you know, where a simple formula would have explained something, they had like 2 pages of written explanation. This is not at all suitable for the modern era. And so, Prime Minister Modi's commitment of minimum government, maximum governance, and also ease of doing business, ease of just being an Indian, was critical to amend the IT Act. And so massive work was done. You know, you talked about the inputs taken from the public. Over a period of many months, we had this all-party select committees are made of people, MPs representing both the government and the opposition. We had more than 40,000 pages of recommendations. But we boiled all that down, and the result was as follows. The original act had 5 lakh words, more than 5 lakh words. And this was cut down to 2.5 lakh words. So the size of the act itself became 50% of what it was. Now, 1,200 provisions and 900 explanations were totally removed because they were very simply replaced with tables and formulas. So you don't have to have paragraph-long explanations of what is the rate of tax on a particular item. Many other such changes were made, which we can talk about. And the whole idea is to make it dramatically simple, especially for the average Indian, not just for big corporates. So, for example, small taxpayers often used to miss out on getting their refunds because they got behind the paperwork. They did not file their refund claim in time. That has been completely taken away. So, if a small taxpayer even is due a refund, if he or she does not file the refund in time, it doesn't automatically become void. They still get it. So there are many hundreds of such examples. So it's a completely new transformed tax act.
So the select committee headed by you played a very pivotal role. Most of the recommendations were accepted by the government. Take us, how was it through the journey of discussing this bill during the committee deliberations? What was it like? Because this is historic, truly historic.
I have no hesitation in saying that this is my 5th term in Parliament, and this was one of my proudest moments. It was one of the most productive work that Parliament has done, and that cut across the spectrum because, as I said, a select committee has opposition members, has government members. For all of us to work harmoniously, this is something that general public doesn't always see, and sometimes young people have skepticism about the system because they only see the disagreements in Parliament, the suspension of Parliament, the disruptions, but the behind-the-scenes work that takes place, because committee meetings are not broadcast, so they don't see that. I'm very proud to say that all the members put in a lot of hard work because it was months of regular sittings every week, hours long. We even traveled to some other places like Mumbai and Bangalore. We met a huge cross-section of stakeholders. We met lots of taxpayer associations, lawyers, chartered accountants, companies, NGOs, charitable trusts, tax officers, of course, other kinds of experts. And I'm proud of the fact that we presented this bill without disharmony. We agreed on the changes in a mutually, in an attitude that we should do what is good for Bharat, rather than make political bickering out of it. We achieved 2 other things that I'm very proud of. We delivered the vetted act, rewritten act, to the Parliament exactly on time, which is a very rare occurrence. If not for the first time, it's extremely rare. There were no major dissent among any of the members. So it was a very productive, and it's one of those occasions when I felt that we are doing useful work for the good of the country.
There's another very important work that you're doing, that's IBC. We'll talk about it in another episode. But coming back to this act, sir, litigation and pendency of cases, biggest problems burdening our judicial system. How will this act reduce litigation?
I'll answer this in 2 ways. First of all, the backlog of the judicial system is a huge, overwhelming problem that impacts all aspects of life, not just tax administration or disputes, not just the economy, not just individuals. We all know that. We have the huge pendency of cases, first of all, puts an economic burden. There have been studies by PhD level students, not just in India, from other countries as well, which point out that the lack of a certain time frame and a certain outcome in judicial cases, because they keep getting reversed at various levels, it has led to something like a 2% penalty on the annual GDP growth rate. 2% is a huge differential. Some countries don't grow by 2%. So a 2% additional on top of our 7.5% growth rate is huge. This is one aspect. But when it comes to tax administration, it became particularly complicated because of the complexity of the old act. So for example, if you wanted to know whether a certain type of income was taxable or tax exempt, in the old act, there would be 30 different references in 12 different chapters with lots of language saying heretofore, but notwithstanding this, that, and the other, and some Latin phrases, which meant that even experts who are tax consultants for decades could not give you always a very clear answer as to whether something is taxable or tax exempt. So which means you, despite your best intention of being an honest taxpayer, you may end up being in some kind of a default, and it led to disputes. Now, I've given you examples of how we have simplified it. So because of that simplification, the potential for dispute and the potential for litigation has drastically come down.
Absolutely. Another aspect that I'd like to touch upon would be, of course, the digital integration. There's focus on faceless assessment, digital compliance. What does it mean for digital economy of India?
So one of an eye-opening part of vetting the Income Tax Act was when the committee had gone to Bangalore. Now, besides meeting many stakeholders there, taxpayers, tax professionals, and the department officials, we had gone to the center, the Central Processing Center, where all these huge number of filings and electronic submissions are processed. It is such an impressive sight because we know that India has developed as the back office to the world, but to see that our own governmental facility, of course it is outsourced, it is run by major names in the IT world, companies and vendors who operate it, was phenomenal. Of course, this has been built over the years and there is always potential to improve it further, but the digital integration is critical because India has become the fastest growing digital economy in the world in terms of financial transactions. Even 10-15 years ago, when people used to have skepticism that how can a vegetable vendor take payment from a credit card, but today everybody scans and pays UPI, whether it's a rickshawala, vegetable vendor, street vendor,
Absolutely.
or major corporations, for everything. All of you have experienced it. So this makes life a lot easier. Another aspect, you see, in the old days, because of the lack of technology, there was a lot of tax evasion. People used to have many different PAN cards and they have to show their income split up into, that has gone. Today you have one PAN card, it is linked to your Aadhaar number, so there is cross-referencing, and because of digital payments, there is data available if people are trying to cheat the system. I mean, if somebody, for example, is traveling abroad every month and buying items that are in lakhs and crores of rupees, but is not a taxpayer, quite likely he or she is a tax evader. So the digital integration improves things, but it also makes life easier. I mean, it makes life harder for those who are trying to cheat the system, but it also makes life easier. For example, in the old days, many taxes were there only to keep track of certain things. You know, certain aspects of tax deduction at source, TDS, were to keep track of transactions. Now, today with GST, today with digital payments, tracking of expenditures and monitoring that information is much easier for the tax authorities. So in the simplification, some aspects have been replaced or streamlined so that you don't need to have a special tax only to track expenditures in most cases.
And also joining us on the program is the CVDT chief, Mr. Ravi Agarwal. Sir, welcome to Sansad TV and thank you so much for joining us. So what does this new Income Tax Act mean for India's direct tax framework?
So Income Tax Act 1961 from 61 till 2025, and this span of about 64 years, it had developed over a period of time, and as you very rightly mentioned, there were so many amendments. And those amendments actually kept pace with the changing realities and requirements of the economy. And therefore, if I may say that Income Tax Act is a dynamic act as against any other acts, and it has kept pace with the economy in terms of the requirements, new requirements, not only in the context of from an economy point of view, but also from the point of view of maybe you needed some sort of incentive for backward areas. So the Income Tax Act 61 provided that those provisions to help giving a push to the backward areas, to some other stream of businesses and so on and so forth. Over a period of time, this act had become complex, and there were multiple cross-referencing that had happened, and taxpayers were finding it difficult to actually navigate through the provisions of the Income Tax Act 61. And therefore, the philosophy and the basic intent of putting in place a 25 Act was, how do we make the language simple and easy for the taxpayers to understand? So, with that philosophy, not changing the core policy as such, because as I mentioned, the 61 Act itself was a dynamic act. So, that shift in the policy had already taken place, but then the priority was to make it simple and lucid and easy to understand, and that's what we have done.
Also, Mr. Agarwal, how does this act reflect contemporary economic realities, including taxation of digital assets and global income?
So, while we were actually drafting this Income Tax Act 25, we also studied the acts and different provisions, direct tax provisions of different countries, and we took some sort of lessons from the the exercise that they had done and the approach that they have adopted. Some of it, this is for example, I mentioned about the tables, the formulas. So, this is a new way of presenting any statute. This is a philosophy that we actually took and from other countries. And in fact, I would share that very recently I was in the OECD sharing the experiences of how we actually went about preparing or drafting this act, and there also we were appreciated for the entire process that was followed in finalizing this act.
And now let's take the questions from our young minds here. Please go ahead, introduce yourself and speak your mind.
Sir, my name is Pushka. I am from PGDV College Evening, and my question is, sir, like it is given in the section 202 that the new tax regime will be the default one. So, sir, which are the scenarios or income fields where the old or the optional tax regime is still beneficial for the taxpayers?
So, no, there are two different issues here. Our income tax rates and the manner of paying that, we have had the old regime and the new regime. The new regime removes a lot of exemptions and makes the rate lower, simplifies. So, gradually people have been moving to the new regime. So, that's different from the Act itself, which regulates the income tax system. So, this Act is prospective. It doesn't deal with what happened before this Act was enacted. So, if there is a dispute from past years, that will still continue to be regulated in the old Act. Suppose there has been some dispute, this is not a retrospective Act. Retrospective legislations are, they make things more complex. So, whatever was existing situation from before, that is almost entirely untouched. This is prospective. So, going forward from this year onwards, when people pay taxes, it becomes a lot simpler. Now, there are certain carry forward provisions which are covered in the general chapters, in the general clauses. Otherwise, you will notice that, as I said, the size of the Act has reduced, the number of clauses has reduced. So, initially there was a little apprehension because people who have spent years and decades memorizing this clause number, that provision, is a little different. But once people get used to the new system, it's much simpler. So, except for the carry forward provisions, which are of certain generic nature, which is there in every Act, the dramatic simplifications that have happened are going to be henceforth, not for the back, not for what happened earlier.
Point taken, sir. Let's have another question.
Sir, my name is Mohammad Sabauddin and I'm from PGDV College Evening. My question is that this new Act introduces a statutory dispute resolution committee for small disputes. So, who is eligible for this to approach, and what are the expected advantages of this in terms of traditional appellate systems?
Good question. Now, this approach to have dispute resolution is an ongoing thing. It has been going on for several years to have dispute resolution authorities which can rule so that, so for example, you can have same kind of dispute in different circles in the country. And once there is a decision taken on policy that this matter will be treated as such, used to have circulars and all that. But separate disputes would continue for a while and drag on for a while before being resolved. Now, steps have been taken, and they will be in the rules following the Act also, that whenever a policy decision is taken or whenever there is a court judgment which has to be applied, it will not just be a circular, but it will be administered in a manner where all categories of, suppose something is still pending, a court has not yet judged or there has been no circular yet, all those issues can be combined and then you can streamline them. Now, this whole idea of reducing disputes and simplifying the process is a work in progress. Lot of development has happened, but for example, one area where we are still developing in India is to have advance rulings. So when large investors want to come and make very large investments in India, they want to have certainty that what will be the taxes. They don't want to invest billions of dollars and later on find out that the tax is different from what they had thought. So this advance ruling is also something, a facility we have had for a while, but these things need to be strengthened further. They need to be made more muscular. And the same thing applies for smaller disputes also, so that unnecessarily procedural reasons should not contribute to delays in settling these issues.
Absolutely. Let's have another question.
Hello everyone, I am Kausal Singh. I am from PGDB College Evening. My question is, how will shift from the previous year and assessment year to the system of tax year affect the individual taxpayer in terms of compliance and understanding to their obligations?
Yeah, this is actually one of the issues that came up many dozens of times during our hearings, and similar questions were asked by chartered accountants, lawyers and others. You are asking a very relevant point, but in reality it's very simple. When sometimes a very complex situation becomes very simple, it becomes a little hard to grasp. The simplicity is, earlier you used to have this concept of this year, previous year, next year, and the years kept changing. So suppose you are dealing with a matter from 2019 and you're talking now, you're talking about previous year, next year, there's a lot of potential for confusion. Now it becomes very simple. There is no concept of previous year, next year, this year, that year, it's just tax year. So currently we are in fiscal year 2025-26. So tax year is 2025-26. So whenever there is some dispute or some tax order of this year, and suppose the matter comes up 3 years later, you won't be talking about this year, previous year, you'll just talk about this matter of tax year 2025-26. So that it becomes much clearer, much simpler, and it's going to have such a small change. This is a very small change. It's going to have a very widespread effect in removing confusion and removing disputes across the country.
Absolutely. Let's hear the young lady.
Myself, Nishika from Institute of Home Economics. And my question is, does the new Income Tax Act align with India's Digital Personal Data Protection Act to ensure complete data privacy for taxpayers?
Yes, in fact, it does. And that is a very good question, because it was unfortunately wrongly reported by some people in the media that there is a different standard being applied or the laws are being changed. Let me make it very clear. The mandate that we had and the mandate for the new act was not to create new policies, because that the government will create from time to time. Like last year in the budget, the government took a policy decision that the entry-level threshold was raised to 12 lakhs income. So we didn't make any such changes. We didn't change the rates or the thresholds. That the Finance Ministry and the Government of India will keep doing every year from time to time, especially during budget time. Our mandate was to simplify the act as it exists, to make it very simple, but we are not changing any policies. So let's take the aspect of the privacy and data security laws which apply. This many people reported that there was some change in this and many questions came up, and we as a committee went into it in great detail. We talked to all the various ministries concerned, experts concerned, and there is no variation. So let me give you an example. Why did they think that some violation of privacy would happen? Because this act provides a clause that during a raid, if somebody is being raided, if they don't cooperate, then you can hack into their laptop. So that's why this question came up. Now the reality is this principle is long established, long before computers for many decades, for 50, 60, 70 years, that a raid has to be properly justified. You can't whimsically raid somebody. There has to be some prima facie evidence that the person is cheating or evading, then only you can have a raid. When a raid happens, in the old days, if the person was not cooperating, suppose they had a tijori, they refused to open, or they had a cupboard, almirah, they refused to open, then the authorities were entitled to break it open. Subsequently, you have computers, so information is locked in laptops, in other devices. And from time to time, this issue came up because in the old act, the reference was not there to technology. So courts have given the judgment from time to time that yes, in a duly authorized survey, if somebody is refusing to cooperate, then the authorities can hack into it. And there are very strict safeguards that they are not allowed to share the information. They are not allowed to do so many things. It has to be treated very carefully. Just like in the old days, if they broke a tijori because the person was not cooperating, they had to keep the contents in safekeeping. It could not be just left in the open for anybody to deal with. So what happened was, there was the old act, there were circulars, and there were many court judgments ruling that you can do the same thing with digital information that you can do with physical information. And that has simply got codified into the new act. No new powers have been given to the authorities, and compatibility with the Data Privacy Act has been maintained.
So thank you so much for putting this with so much of clarity. And before we wrap up this show, sir, the new Income Tax Act and India being $5 trillion economy, your thoughts on that?
My thoughts is 5 trillion is just a milestone. We should be thinking in terms of 10 and 15 trillion and more.
Yes, absolutely.
The reality is, I say this to young people all the time. For thousands of years, Bharat was the place where people from all over the world used to come, whether they wanted to earn, whether they wanted to learn, whether they wanted to get fame and fortune or spirituality. And we lost that for many centuries. And gradually we are, as the people of your generation say, getting our mojo back. And with this rapid growth that is happening, there is a renaissance that is happening in Bharat. So the $5 trillion economy will see us at number 3 out of the global economies. But we have been the fastest growing economy for several years now. And we have to maintain this because we are still a middle income country. And the dream of Viksit Bharat that Prime Minister Modi has spelled out for 2047 will need us to sustain this. And people of your generation are going to start playing important roles in making this journey happen towards 2047. So 5 trillion is just the next stepping stone, not the end.
On that sanguine note, thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Panda, and thank you so much for this meaningful discussion.
Thank you.
Thanks
It's a
lot.
pleasure.
Well, viewers, that's all we have for you in this edition. Thanks for watching and stay tuned to Sansad TV. Goodbye for now from my side.
To watch more programs of Sansad TV, subscribe to our YouTube channel and don't forget to like and share them.